So this should work out for everyone. Everything should be embedded here and work okay without the webcam. Hopefully you got a copy of the Intellectual Freedom handout that I posted on the Handouts tab of the discussion forum. Did everybody have a chance to locate it? It's pink, blue, and yellow.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So for my presentation, this is sort of a pre-service workshop in June or August for other school librarians. So sort of like a job alike. I don't know if you do that in your district where we would all be librarians coming together. It is on intellectual freedom, just like the previous one, just with a slightly different take on who the intended audience is. And so my topic is Our Right to Read. That is the name of the 2017 Bandbooks theme. And so we're going to be talking about intellectual freedom, really with the standpoint of how to teach the teachers at your school about intellectual freedom and how to include student voice in all of your intellectual freedom lessons in the library and Bandbooks week so that we can see that it's meaningful and not maybe as dry. So just a background, I know we're all librarians and I know we all know. On your handout, in that pink space in the middle, you've got some space to write a 2-sentence, sort of your own definition of what intellectual freedom means to you. If you could pretend to record that on your handout, that'd be awesome. And in our pretend world where we're all sitting in desks, you would now discuss with your elbow partner, and you're going to develop a shared definition with yourself and your elbow partner that's 1 sentence long, which is what you're going to do here for me. So if you have your cell phone, awesome. If not, you can toggle over to a new tab to use Poll Everywhere, but you text that number 37607, and then the message is my account, Heather Rowan 408. And then you can type a 1-sentence definition of intellectual freedom and it'll populate all of our definitions up on here. So if you could do that for me, that would be awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, and if you want to add your name like Lindsay did so we can see who's participating, that's also awesome. All right, it's a little fun to get a hang of Poll Everywhere. I don't know if anybody's used Socrative in the classroom. I like Poll Everywhere a little bit better because you don't have to download a special app. Fantastic, right to information. I'm not sure if that's everyone or not. Great access in the information, so that's going to cover, you know, internet access as well. Right, definitely the First Amendment. All right, is that everybody? Is anybody still struggling with logging in or typing on their phone really quickly? I don't want to cut anybody off at the knees. All right, so those are some great definitions. If you had your handout on you in our pretend world, fantastic. Right to read, speak, access, and learn whatever you want, right? So that emphasis on learning. So if you had your handout in the pink box, there's a space for your last shrinking summary where you would define intellectual freedom in 7 words or fewer. So we're going to pretend that we're writing there on our handout based on all that awesomeness, of the previous screen. So incorporating sort of everybody's ideas together to come up with the best 7-word phrase or sentence that you could. Right, so as the previous group said, a lot of where we tend to see intellectual freedom detailed is in our collection policy. So most collection policies are going to quote a combination of this ALA definition, right? So it's originating in the Library Bill of Rights, and you've got some space on your handout to fill in the blanks. The idea that a person's right to use a library should not be changed, it should not be affected because of where they're from, their age, background, or views. The age has been a real stickler, right? Minors were not covered by the Library Bill of Rights in its earliest editions. There were a lot of legal cases we'll talk about in a second that established those for us. And the way they interpret that for our school libraries is that only parents and guardians have right to dictate what their children can or cannot read, and it really only pertains to their children, not to other children. The State Board of Education in Texas has their own version that a lot of people include in their collection policy as well, but they're all sort of permutations of this ALA interpretation. And this is something that's really, really relevant now, certainly because of things like WikiLeaks and the idea that I should be able to access information if I elect to, and where the government comes, in between me and the access to information that I might like. So since our goal here is to talk about why we want to talk to our colleagues who may not know as much as we do about intellectual freedom and First Amendment free speech rights, basically, thanks to the cases, the legal cases that protect our rights and ability to recommend books to minors without fear of firing or other legal repercussions, it covers the teachers too. So they also have the freedom to recommend books to students in good conscience without worrying about that. But potential conflict with administrators can lead to self-censorship, and teachers are really on the front line, right? They're seeing the kids every day. They're seeing parents on a much more regular basis than us. So a lot of times they're a lot more tentative about what they are including on reading lists or in their classroom library. So it's really important for us to support them and help them understand how they're protected and how we can help them if a parent starts to complain. So when we're discussing with our teachers about this, and there's some links to different resources on your handout, and we want to talk to them about the limitations of classroom libraries, which often tend to be highly influenced by the teacher's personal taste. You lack a sense of multiculturality, diversity, and gender and sexual orientation representation. They may shy away from controversial topics for the reasons we just discussed, right? They don't want to offend those parents. They don't want to damage that close relationship that they need so they can educate children every day. And then maybe pretty narrow when it comes to reading levels, right? An individual second grade or sixth grade teacher is not going to necessarily have everything from K to 12 covered just because she has some low level or some high level kids. Lexile limited reading programs, right? May be appropriate within curriculum, but they're not something that we choose to govern, and we specifically choose not to govern them in the library. And this is where you want to get into the difference between reading within the curriculum and the recreational reading. So if students are checking out books from a classroom library or a school library for silent sustained reading or drop everything and read, or some kind of self-selected reading, it's important to let the child choose, even if it's maybe not the Lexile level you would prefer, because we're trying to help students learn how to enjoy reading and develop a sense of individual taste. And if we're governing, oh, well, you can only read realistic fiction, and oh, you need to read something that's, you know, 7th grade or higher because you read at a 7th grade reading level, then we're impeding a student's identity, a formation of identity as a reader, and we are engaging in a little bit of censorship there. So I have some programming ideas, right, because we're all librarians and we want to do more with kids in our classrooms. So to touch on those legal cases that I discussed, my suggestion would be to have a class discussion or a small group discussion activity and to use a back channeling app like Today's Meet, which is great. It allows for multiple simultaneous discussion threads. There's no shouting, so everyone can be polite. You can project it up on a screen so everyone can see all the conversations going on at once. And it really helps those shyer, more withdrawn students have the confidence to participate. So some cases you might bring up to your kids were a couple of kids in California who wore U.S. flag shirts on Mexican American Pride Day, and their principal required them to change. Tinker versus Des Moines CISD. So this is an old case from the 60s where some students wore black armbands to school to protest our involvement in the Vietnam War. The principal sent them home, and the courts decided that free speech did not end at the school doors. It was a really seminal case when it comes to students' free speech rights. SJW versus Lee Summit School District. So these were two brothers who ran a blog in which, among other things, they complained or vented about their school experience and made fun of some of their classmates. And they did this on school computers as well as personal computers. And the school argued that it was disruptive, especially when the students being mocked found out. The lower court sided with the school, but an appellate court went the other direction. And lastly, we've got the really foundational case of the Board of Education versus PICO. So this was the one that decided schools just couldn't remove books without a formal challenge process because they didn't match the values or were plain filthy in their words. And you've got a link to the biography of Everett T. Moore, who was an early champion for teachers and librarians' rights to recommend books to juveniles. And it goes into more detail on that. Does anybody have any other, I know that some of us may have like a social studies background. Does anybody else have any other sort of legal precedents that you're aware of or you have used when discussing free speech or First Amendment rights with students? Nope. Okay. Well, we'll move on then. So this is this year's poster for Banned Books Week, and it is sponsored in part by the Freedom to Read Foundation, which Everett Moore was a co-founder of. So our next topic is going to be censorship. So you can respond as many times as you'd like to this, and it says, which of the following things constitute censorship? So if you could whip out your cell phones again, that would be amazing. For sure, Harry Potter in particular was subjected to this quite often, as was Twilight. Yeah, removing the title. So removing a title before challenge process, I Am Jazz, and other books depicting teen sexuality tend to do that. Keeping a controversial book in a drawer, this is the fate of And Tango Makes Three. Limiting checkouts by reading level, so that's where we were talking about Hunger Games. Happens a lot with Hunger Games and Twilight. Parent signature is an interesting one. This tends to be the way that a lot of middle schools manage their checkouts of like Lone Star books, or elementary schools manage their checkouts of the J level Bluebonnet books that maybe teachers or librarians think are a little too grown up for their kids. So, but we agree, right? These are all censorship. But all librarians are not on the same page as us, which is has been a little surprising, maybe startling to me, probably not to everyone if you've worked in a bunch of different school districts. I may just work in a little more of an open school district when it comes to intellectual freedom. We're going to move on here. Thanks, guys. Okay. So on your handout, it gives you a little bit of space to write down which form of censorship previously described, right, on this page. So in that blank space, you'd write down which one you think it would surprise the teachers at your school the most, right? Just because we know those things are censorship doesn't mean all of the teachers at our school are going to agree that's censorship. So are there any there that you think the teachers at your school might not consider censorship?
I think a lot of them are going to think that the parent signature or permission is just being careful, and I don't think they would consider it censorship in a lot of cases.
Okay, good point.
I think
That's actually the one that I also would agree that I personally wouldn't think. I feel like that's a way of allowing a book to stay on the shelf. So yeah, I mean that's one that I know a lot of people wouldn't see as being censorship because you're still allowing it. You're just asking for permission.
I think limiting checkouts by reading level or grade level is one that people may not see as censorship because a kindergartner is not going to be reading a 5th grade level book anyway. So maybe they wouldn't see it as anything other than just making common sense.
I agree with that one as well. I know I have seen that happen in my library. A kindergartner wants to have a big heavy book in their hand that they take home, and there's no way that kid's going to be able to read that book.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that for sure, and I can see teachers and librarians not really considering that censorship.
Well, right, and I can definitely see your point there because you're less doing it about that particular title than like the child cannot demonstrate they can read that book on their own. But then again, like you never know, like maybe mom reads a giant chapter book to them every night when they go to bed, even though they're 7. So it may or may not, sort of depending on whether or not the child was going to be able to use that book in any way, or if it was just a thing. But I know, like, for instance, when I was a child, they didn't allow children, like, upstairs into the adult section. Children were allowed to check out books from the adult section until they were 12. And the public library definitely did not think that was censorship, that they wouldn't let 10-year-olds check out adult nonfiction or what have you. So my thoughts, though, on requiring parent signature for some books, if you set that as a barrier, like not every child is going to be able to get that parent signature, right? Because some parents would require to read the book first, and it also sort of really communicates your values to the parent, that there is something they should be concerned about in that book. And just because it has, a J sticker on it or a YA sticker on it, depending on what school you're at, you in the school are making a value judgment about that book that you're communicating to the parents, whether you've decided to do so or not.
I have a situation at my school with letter E that I'm just wanting to get other people's opinion on what our librarian does. Kindergartners are not allowed to check out books or bring them home unless they have a parent signature form, which I obviously do not agree with, but that is what happens.
That's really sad.
What's the rationale for that? That I don't agree with that at all, but is it they lose them or what?
That they're not responsible enough. So they can check certain ones out, but they cannot take them home. They have to have a letter from their parents. Sorry, what?
So is that like maybe like a fiscal responsibility thing where the school doesn't want to put parents on the hook for like Tommy spilling juice all over a book, and that's why he's only allowed to use it at school?
That is what our librarian says, but we also have a lot of D going on in my library where they're not allowed to check out certain books.
I assume that first graders are allowed to take books home, though?
It's kindergartner. They are allowed to take them home, but they cannot, only if they have the parent signature. If they don't have the parent signature, they have to either just look at books in the library, or up to teacher discretion, they can keep them in the classroom.
Kindergartners are not allowed to take books home at my library either, and it's not even like a parent signature thing. They're just not allowed to take them home. I don't think the librarian has had any parents ask to sign a permission slip and allow their kid to take the book home, but as far as I know, I mean, it was kind of a decision between the kindergarten teachers themselves and the librarian. I'm at a very low income school, and a lot of those kids do lose the books, and then they can't pay for them. So they just don't, because of their responsibility thing, they don't allow the kindergartners to take them home.
Yeah, our campus has the same thing. So basically, the librarian meets with the teachers and sends out letters so that parents can check them out. So that way the students don't have access, but through parent checkout.
That seems to be putting an extra barrier between children wanting a book and being able to have the time to read it if their parents have to set foot on campus to check it out. Well, not all parents have time. So I also work in low-income schools, and a lot of my parents wouldn't have the time to come in and do that. And I do understand that younger students are maybe less responsible because they're scatty, but nothing changes between the last week of kindergarten and the first week of first grade that makes them more responsible. They need to learn. They need an opportunity.
It
I
really
completely
seems like those librarians are missing a tremendous opportunity to build readers. You know, kindergartners are very interested in the library. They're interested in books. You're training them how to take care of them. And I could see not letting them take, you know, a whole stack of things so that they're likely to lose them. But I think probably the number of books lost versus the disadvantage that you're doing to those kids, I don't support that rule.
I've experienced a couple of librarians who are, the only kind way to say it is they are very close to retirement and they are done with the job. And they're done. They're done with the job. They're done with giving second chances. So I wonder if it's maybe these librarians making these decisions need some fresh opinions, maybe some younger or newer librarians to encourage them.
The librarian at my school is actually not older. She's mid-30s. I think she's been teaching about 15 or taught for 3 years and has been a librarian for 12. The other thing, and I don't know if this is considered censorship, it kind of goes with E, is that if a kid doesn't return their book, they're not allowed to check one out for the rest of the year. And she was making them sit out at recess, and our principal found out about that and put a stop to that rule.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
He really needs
I'm trying to take her
hear
spot.
about intellectual freedom.
No,
Yeah.
I heard that if you have, I think it was 10%, if you have 10% of your books each year that you're either lost, stolen, or ruined, that you should consider yourself a successful librarian, because that means that the students are reading. You know, if the books never disappear or never ruined, then that means no one's using them.
Exactly. Like, our job is not to be like the zookeepers of like the most immaculate children's books in the Western world. It's just not. I mean, and maybe this is, I work at a pretty low-income library, so when we buy children's books, we don't usually buy hardcover. Like, I know I see a lot of people discussing, like, what level of binding do you get so the book lasts forever? Like, the book does not need to last forever. Like, I don't care what it is. If it's a children's book and it's going to get lost and you went $25 deep into that book, that was your fault not thinking about how it would be used. You can buy those books paperback for $6 and they will endure 15 checkouts. When it comes to like teen chapter books, by the time the covers start to look super out of date and 80s-licious, the teenagers are not going to keep checking them out. They do not want your 1970 copy of like Island of the Blue Dolphins, because it looks boring to them. So if we get in a situation where we invest so much money in the collection that we can't stand to lose books, or we feel like we always have to replace every book that was lost, even if it wasn't circulating heavily, or we put kids in the district I taught in, we put kids on the hook for library books for their entire educational career till they move to a new school. So if you lost a book in kindergarten, your parents owe that money till 5th grade. And that's a really big deal for those low-income parents that a lot of us work with. And I get not wanting to put those parents on the hook for the cost of whatever books their kids might lose, but I think that solution of like really limiting K checkouts to like 2 or 5 or whatever books at a time could go a long way to solving that, because I just think that disadvantages like struggling readers or delighted readers so much to not be able to have access to those like especially kids who may not be able to get books in other ways. But it also sort of raises the question, like, the kid couldn't get a library card at a public library without their parents. So if you're not signing some kind of financial agreement with the kid's parents in their like first day of school packet among all the other forms they fill out, the parent shouldn't suddenly be on the hook financially for like every book a kid's ever checked out without you even making that agreement with them, in my point of view.
I think what they're doing in my district is if they do lose a book, you know, a bill is sent home repeatedly. Eventually, it's usually written off when you know the families aren't going to pay it. But if they owe, you know, upwards of $50, $60, $70, we hold their end of year report card. They can't get it until something, even a negligible amount, has been paid towards it, even if it's just $5, or the parent comes in at least to be face to face to kind of talk to the librarian about being responsible with the books, and then the debt is usually just written off when they get their report card.
I like that. I mean, I like the idea of having some kind of like book stewardship class, kind of like defensive driving, that you might make a kid sit through if they had racked up X amount of money in lost books, because having a kid never be able to check out a book again because they lost a book in first grade that their parents can't pay for is really the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Right. And even though it's maybe not explicit censorship, it sure has the same long-term effect.
My librarian, for kids who can't pay, if they have just outright said, I'm not going to be able to pay this fine, I really want to check out, my librarian will let kids come in and do like some volunteer work in the library. And it just depends on the ability level of that kid. It might be cleaning off the covers, or, you know, picking up trash, or, you know, doing whatever. We have a garden off of our library, going and doing something in the garden, but she finds things for them to do to kind of like work off that fine, which I really enjoy that.
My mentor librarian does the same thing, and I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah, that's stellar. Like, all of those are great suggestions. Like, that's definitely the kind of attitude we need to have towards lost books. We don't need to be like treating kids like they're criminals at age 6 because, you know, they sat on something or lost it or spilled something on it.
And so much of their lives is out of their control. That
Right.
book probably wasn't lost because of anything to do with them.
Exactly. So it just, you know, and that breaks our relationship with the child who knows that that's objective reality, right? It's not their fault mom left it behind at grandma's, and grandma's not going to be able to mail it, you know, to them, or, you know, whatever has potentially happened to it. But we're acting as though they're like fully autonomous adults who have that much power over every day. So that's a great point. All right. So our ALA definition of censorship, after that amazing discussion of what's going on in our school libraries. So censorship really, and this is why I made it the blank, it's a change in the access status. If you had a book and people started like looking a little bit askance at it, and you make it parental signature required, or you make it 8th grade shelf only, then that counts as censorship because it's a change in the access status. And age and grade level changes are absolutely part of that. You've got some censorship resources to the ALA. I've included a couple articles. The ERIC Digest article is super old. It's from 1990, but it is really great, and it talks about that sort of more subconscious censorship. The School Library Journal one is also about self-censorship, right? And the previous group talked about that like largely being related to language. The standard of what inappropriate language is just varies so wildly from age level to age level, community to community. And also in the state of Texas, anything that refers to gender identity, sexual orientation, or romantic gender preference is pretty much seen as, you know, way above what's appropriate for young children, regardless of whether or not it applies to them or not. So one of the things I wanted to introduce is how we have that discussion with our colleagues, because it is not unusual for an elementary school, especially lower elementary school teacher, to ask like, hey, I want you to keep my kids, you know, in the E1 section, or I want to make sure that nobody is checking out I Am Jazz because I don't want to hear from those parents, you know, that kind of thing. So this is a school librarian. She is a elementary school librarian. And we talked about how she handles censorship. So she gets way out in front at the beginning of the year when she introduces herself to all her new colleagues. She sends a school-wide email. She says that she includes the district's policy on the fact the district can't just remove a book because somebody doesn't like it. She details their formal process for challenging a book. She includes some ALA information on free speech. She includes the Texas Library Association information on free speech. So this really helps teachers who may be worried about whether or not to include a book as story time or on a reading list, exactly how they're covered and you know, what it takes if a book's going to be removed, that it's not because they don't like it or a parent doesn't like it, it just sort of instantly vanishes or goes under a rug. So I liked that attitude of being upfront with your colleagues every year. But we know that there's a lot of pressure on the school librarian herself or himself to maybe not buy a particular book. So if you could whip out your phone again and let me know who you think creates the largest pressure to censor when you are displaying or purchasing, adding to your collection. Oh my gosh, so we definitely agree that it is parents. Obviously, we don't want the parents to make us, you know, look bad, for lack of a better word, in front of our administrators, right? Our administrators don't want us to have this conflict with the parents. Does anybody want to comment on the thing that they chose, why they felt that way?
So I chose administrators because I think a lot of admin just don't even want it to be a possibility that a parent is going to be offended. So it's kind of avoiding censoring before the problem even arises, just to save on the drama.
Right. It's such a tough decision, especially if you've got some funding issues. Your administrator does not want the school library to be the reason the school gets bad PR and angry groups of parents are talking about why you have some filthy title on the shelf. So there's definitely pressure.
No one wants attention drawn to their school in a negative way.
Right, and all it takes is a slow news day at your local news channel, and that could be on the internet, and all of the angry people who love to shout on the internet will find you and come to your virtual doorstep to let you know how they feel about that choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and not everybody feels up for it. So my programming idea for discussing censorship is helping students understand what we as librarians go through and the choices that are made behind closed doors about what material is available and accessible to them. So I have a Google Doc that the link to it is under programming ideas on your handout. And I've got a little picture of it on the next slide. So these are statements from real librarians doing what people do and arguing with each other on Facebook. So you would divide up these statements, you'd have each student read their librarian statement, and you have a small group discussion about how censorship affected them, how the students felt about censorship, and in response, since this is a social media sort of concept, have the students create some kind of social media product, PSA, a blog post, a thing link, something shareable, right? If you use, I think it's Edumo, that's the educational blogging site, right? That might be a good place for you. So these are names mostly redacted, actual things that people said on Facebook with slight grammar corrections by me. And there's a full page of these. And watching these people argue on Facebook was really a wake-up call to me, because I had hoped, right, this is from Future Ready Librarian, so I had hoped people who had self-defined as being future ready would not be trying so hard. And if you look at CW, right, CW wants to put more books on restricted shelves. CW does not like having those dirty books in their library at all, and they want to avoid that drama at any cost. And it doesn't matter if the book is popular. They are, like Wimpy Kid, they are happy to restrict it.
That's really an intense personal bias. I don't think that's as common, but I might be wrong about that.
I mean, I'm not saying it's common, but there were 2 posts within a couple of days of each other earlier this spring, which all said just over 100 school librarians commented on. And I did check people's profiles to see that they were currently employed as librarians. So I didn't include anybody who didn't have a job information. A lot of people who want to argue about this are really defensive about their right to decide what's appropriate for kids at their school level. Like, I had thought it wasn't as common as it was, but watching people discuss this online has sort of raised my awareness. It's a lot more common than I think we might like to admit. Right? And we're not just talking about keeping like pure erotica like 50 Shades of Grey out of the library. We're talking about, I think the starting post on this one was people arguing about whether or not to have Tango Makes Three in a school library, and the previous one was about whether to remove Little House on the Prairie for its racially insensitive comments and depiction of Native American peoples.
I mean, I think the thing is, if a book is written for children with the intention of being for children, we need to allow our children to have access to it. JP's comment that he just kind of, he or she just kind of let the issue fade away because it wasn't a formal complaint. I actually kind of agree with what he did, because sometimes, as we know, parents just want to be heard and then don't necessarily want to follow up. They just want to be heard. So, and sometimes you just have to hear them out and then let things naturally disappear. So I kind of understand why JP would do that.
Oh, absolutely. Like, there's no need to like bring extra animosity right to that conflict. That's definitely something you can sort of de-escalate.
The librarian at my school retired several years ago now. It's been like 4 or 5 years, but she did the same thing that CW did with Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Didn't like it, and so she kept it. She had 1 copy of the first book, and she kept it in a drawer, and she just didn't even tell anybody that it was available, and she hated the book. She didn't want anybody to check it out, and when my librarian came in, she realized that, and then she immediately went in and bought several copies of all of those books, because those are like the #1 thing that kids are asking for, and it was ridiculous to think that they weren't being allowed access to something that they wanted to read.
For a librarian to do that just makes me think that they don't understand children at all, because it's giving no respect to our young readers whatsoever, that we think they can't differentiate between what's real and what's not, and that if they read something that's a little bit naughty or a little bit cheeky, that suddenly they're going to become bad kids and do it. It's just ridiculous.
Right, and I'm sure she'd be one of those people who was super offended by Captain Underpants, like y'all were talking about earlier, because the principal was mean. Right, no, there's no Captain Underpants at this school. I don't understand that person. Like, I don't need to be anybody else's mom. Like, I have infinite respect for the parents of those children and their rights to raise their children the way they see fit. I don't need to usurp their role or do it for them and assume that I know how they would wish to parent their children. Because even if 85 out of 100 parents do want me to keep Wimpy Kid away from their kid, it's not my place to do anything for the remaining, those remaining 15 parents. Like, each parent can decide and communicate to their child, and if the kid brings Wimpy Kid home and mom goes ballistic, then kid can bring her right back, right? That's the relationship between mom and their kid, right? My mom was the one who would have gone ballistic, but it wasn't my librarian's job to police what my mom thought was going to be okay. I think it's a slightly different matter to say, like, hey, you're 12, this is a YA book, it has some pretty mature stuff in it, it's got some sex and violence. Like, think to yourself, like, is this something you feel ready for, and is this something that your parents might be okay with? Like, it might be a discussion you want to have with your parents, but isn't that your job to be their parents?
So I have a question on that topic. Like you mentioned the example of a middle schooler that wants to read a pretty mature book, YA book. In terms of parents and just them parenting their own child, not trying to interfere with what other students are reading, is there anything that a parent can do for their child other than see what's in their backpack? What's the relationship on the elementary, middle school level between parents and librarians and what their child is reading? I'm just curious because I've always worked in a high school.
Holly, I would hope they're not trying to team up and enforce parents' rules. I mean, that would be, right, I taught in high school, so it wasn't my job to reinforce your dress code for your child. I reinforced the school's dress code. If your child met the school's dress code and you thought wearing pants was a sin against God, like, that is your business with your child. Like, if you want to come to school in first period and see if they changed after they left your car and before they got to school, my door is open, but I'm not going to police your child, right? Your family values are your family values.
I think reading a book with your child goes a long way. And if they're a middle schooler or a high schooler, like, you might not physically be reading that book to them, but to be reading the same book as your student at the same time and then setting aside some time at home to talk about that book, I think that can go a long way and kind of allows you to know what your kids are reading and what they're thinking about what they're reading, and to kind of help you to see kind of where they're at intellectually and what they should be reading and shouldn't be reading and that kind of thing.
That's that's amazing. Yeah, and it really, you also get the benefit of your modeling, right? Reading to your child if you're reading sort of in a tiny home-sized book club. All right, anyone else? So we're going to move along. And our last topic is challenges, right? We don't want them to happen, but if we're doing our job properly, it's possible that they might. And the best way to deal with challenges is to really be prepared in advance. So that means having a really good detailed formal challenge policy in your selection policy document. If you come from a big school district, it's probably there. If you come from a charter school or a private school, you may need to update it, or a really small school district. Update your principals on what the challenge process is. So in the case of the top librarian there, it was her principal who'd asked her to limit the checkout. And so the principal needs to know what's going on and be on board. That way it's not a horrible surprise if a parent comes up. So they understand what's expected of that parent, right? And so that they can say with just as much confidence when the angry parent tries to get their way just through emails and phone calls and showing up in person, that there is a document that has to be filled out. There's a committee that has to meet and they all have to read the work. Like there's this whole process. Identify your challenge committee. It's really easy. This happened in a school district where I taught. A book was challenged in an elementary school, and the librarians hadn't selected their challenge committee, right? It was very open-ended. It was just teachers, school board members, administrators, but they hadn't gotten people on board and asked individual people specifically if they would be part of the challenge committee. And having those names down sort of allows, in that case, the school board sort of took over and put who they wanted on the committee, and it was weighted very heavily in favor of the complainant parents, right? And it wasn't the committee that, you know, one would make if one was just being level-headed and wanted the best reviewers for work possible. And lastly, keeping a paper or digital copy of the formal complaint, the formal challenge form on hand. That way you have something to hand a parent who is upset. You know, if you ask them after they've expressed their concerns, if they would like to file a formal complaint, having something to give them or a link you can email them or a link that's on your school's library website can make them more satisfied in that transaction, that you weren't just sort of leaving them hanging and saying, hey, there's a formal challenge process, go figure it out. I know it may seem counterintuitive, right? Because if you hand them the thing they need to get all that mess started, they should be twice as likely to do it. But maybe seeing the, you know, that the form's a little bit imposing, and feeling like someone took their concerns that seriously will be enough to make them feel satisfied. And obviously you do have that discussion, right? This doesn't just remove the book for your child. You're absolutely, welcome to prevent your child from reading this book. This removes the book from every other child, regardless of what their parents might want, right? Without consulting their parents on that. And helping sort of put them in the shoes of those other parents. This is a sign that the teacher I interviewed earlier has in her library. A number of other teachers also said they had this to sort of help the student understand that a book that is too much for them maybe isn't for them. Not every book is for every reader. But right there's someone who that book means something to going to this school. Right, and that tends to be the really, really big issue with the gay books that have gay characters or characters with gay parents, right? Is the idea books should be a mirror, and parents are horrified sometimes because they feel like it's like precociously sexual to mention that in a picture book or a children's book, but right, we're trying to make sure that there's something for every kid at that school. All right, so to prepare classroom teachers, and they're the ones, a lot of times censorship isn't a parent upset about a book their kid brought home. It's a parent who is aware that there's something new and controversial out. Like right now it's been 13 Reasons this past school year. I know a lot of you guys are in elementary school libraries. Did anybody have 13 Reasons go crazy at their school like it did for me? Did anybody watch it on Netflix or read it or anything like that in their own time?
I've seen
A lot of our students watched it.
Elementary school, wow. Or are you a middle school librarian? Sorry, I didn't catch who was talking.
Sorry.
I'm elementary. We didn't have students watch it that I've heard
Okay.
of.
Sorry, I'm high school, and a lot of our students were watching it, and some of the teachers got together and were kind of talking about it. Because for some of our students, to be honest, watching it was kind of triggering for those of them that are sensitive to those topics, and so we just got together to talk about how to support the students as they have those discussions.
Sure, that's really good. Like I said, that's one way we end up with challenges, right? A parent is aware, they've heard from someone else or they've seen this show or whatever, and then they want to make sure that we don't have it in our library so their precious child cannot be exposed to that. Another way that challenges arise is through assigned reading lists or suggested reading lists, particularly summer reading lists, because the parent has this document and they have a long time to look at it. And a lot of times it doesn't matter to them that 12 of the 15 books have no profanity, nudity, or gay characters. And even though the kid only has to pick one, the fact that there are 3 on there that have something objectionable is really upsetting to them. So a lot of times, and it's not, as best as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not technically censorship to remove something from a suggested reading list, right? Because the ability to access the material hasn't changed in any way, but that tends to be how books become challenged, is people just want them off the reading list. They don't want it to seem like the school is acknowledging or promoting any content they might find objectionable in that book. So it's important that we talk our English or language arts teachers through the process so they understand what a challenge is. Like you said, they're on the front lines with the parents. So they understand that it is a formal process. It's not just a complaint. We don't take books away just because someone doesn't like them. And then also so that we can be prepared, we can ask for advanced copies of those suggested or assigned reading lists so we can identify potential challenges. That doesn't mean tell the teacher so the teacher censors their list. Like, you shouldn't tell the teacher if that's a book that gets challenged if they don't already know it, unless they ask you. There's a link of the top 100 most challenged YA books in the book challenge resources section, so you can access if you want to. The PDF is clickable. There's also a QR code if you print it out so that you can get that clickable linked version. So for student voice, we want to reinforce the connection between free speech and the freedom to read. So this is where we can interview students about banned or challenged books that have meant something to them and have them describe what was important to them about Catcher in the Rye or Diary of a Wimpy Kid or Confessions of a Wallflower. Have them create a video or podcast, or you create a video or podcast of interviews so you can share with your colleagues. And it's fine to get teachers in on that. Because the idea is that we're sharing how meaningful these books are to children, these books that have been taken away from some children to some degree or another, right? It's not just an intellectual topic. What the ALA is promoting this year is to have students tweet their favorite author of a banned or challenged book. So there's like a list of all their Twitter handles, all of the top 10 authors. So John Green's on there because Searching for Alaska is again / still on the top 10 list. And encourage student-led book clubs to read banned books as your, that should say September, as your September reading club theme. So here are our top 10 this year, and you can see John Green's book there again, Eleanor and Parks there again. Most of these are on here for some kind of sex, sexuality, homosexuality, gender identity adjacent topic, with the exception of Eleanor and Park, which is language, I believe. And a lot of these should be familiar, even if you haven't read them, as books that get, on these lists a lot. For those of you who have makerspaces, I'm personally a big fan of our makerspace. So one of the things we talked about, my mentor librarian and I, is hosting a challenge book cover art contest so that we can recover our old books so that they don't have to be weeded because the girl on the front has big hair. Also, against the cover, so you could blur the titles on covers and have kids match cover art and synopses and work on that sort of like visual fluency. And lastly, displays. Usually what libraries do for Banned Books Week for those challenged to banned books is just sort of pull everything you have, put them on a table, add some ALA materials received in the mail, and Yahtzee. So these are ways to make them more interactive. They're both augmented or virtual reality activities. So I'm going to take out my headphones and see if you can maybe.
Hey, you. Yeah, you over there. You looking for a good book to read? Then come pick me up off the shelf. See, in this book, I'm back, and I'm along with my dog friends. We're going to a national championship on the best dog of all. And along the way, Griffin, the man with the plan, has a problem he has to solve. I want to know what's going to happen. So I really do need to come check this out.
All right, sorry guys, I know I'm running way over time.
We lost the sound for a while too.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was hoping that if I took out my headphones that it would play the computer audio.
No.
Oh, I'm not sure how to make it do that then. So those are both different ways to attach either a book trailer video or an audio talk using an app to the physical item of a book or the photo of the book cover. And you can create those as a librarian. You can have classes try that. You can have individual students if you've got a library club. And there are also just tons already, especially book trailers on YouTube that you could attach. So we do that for all of our Bluebonnet Award books. All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much. I've got a whole bunch of references. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I know I ran over. If you have any questions or comments or anything I didn't cover that you think would be especially relevant, I would love to hear it. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Heather. You had some great ideas that I think everybody could utilize.
Thank you.